Randy, you're talking about smooth and orderly. We don't have it at all. We don't have anything. And the crisis is going to get deeper and deeper until we get to the point where we realize that we are on a path which is leading us to Armageddon. You understand? If you don't get to that realization, we'll just be beating about the bush. Randy, what we are discussing today has a very long history. And I think, to be fair, that point ought to be made. The debt overhang, the debt problem is not new. It's an old story. Why do you think that in 1972-73, Achampo was talking about the fact that we are not going to pay the debt? It had become an issue by then. This is 50 years ago. It was an issue. The debt overhang was an issue. Okay? And it has persisted up until today. I recall that after Achampo, when the Liman administration came, the Liman administration sought to do a deal with the IMF. And some of the conditionalities actually propelled the subsequent coups which brought the AFRC into power, if you remember. I mean, this deal with the IMF, which brought the PNDC to power. This IMF deal, which spoke about devaluation of the currency and so on, became a pretext, for the coup. Now, in 1982-83, the PNDC itself sought to deal with similar problems, okay, leading to a major deal with the IMF and the World Bank, leading to first the adoption of the Economic Recovery Program and subsequently the Structural Adjustment Program and so on. All of those didn't work. Now, for me, what is significant is that at the time that we were crying out, and warning that the economy was on the brink of collapse, the statistics indicated that we were spending 76%, mark the percentage, 76% of just total export earnings, not total national revenue, total export earnings on debt repayment and debt servicing. And that was a huge problem for us. Okay. We've gone to the IMF, we've come out of the IMF, we've gone back, we are now going back again, and so on. The problem keeps getting worse. Now, we are not talking about 76% of export earnings. We are talking about 120% of total national revenue being expended on debt servicing, debt repayment, and public sector emoluments. The problem is far worse than it was in the 1970s. Now, what have we done? All we have done is to go back to the old prescriptions which didn't work. That's my headache. We've gone back to the old prescriptions which didn't work. Now, if all of us will recall, when President Kufuor won elections in 2000, by the time he won the election, Ghana had become the star people of the IMF and the World Bank, were being praised all over the world. Developing countries were being told to emulate our example. By the time President Kufuor won the election in 2000, money supply had gone up by about 50%. Money supply. Inflation was hovering around 46%. 46%. Okay? Now, when Kufuor took over, the same World Bank and IMF sent him briefings. They sent him a letter indicating that the economy had so collapsed that if he didn't begin to take drastic measures and so on, we were going to face Armageddon. Those discussions led to Kufuor's government adopting HIPIC. And I remember that at the time, people like Akoto Ampao, Yao Graham and others said, look, this is no solution. And that if you adopt HIPIC, you eventually come back to the same situation. In fact, our situation is going to get worse. Today, why? everything is proving that what Yao Graham, Akoto Ampao, and all of them said was the truth at the time. And perhaps if you had listened to them, we would not be in this mess. So I think that's the first thing. It is important to know the history. It's important to understand that these are measures which have been implemented before, even to extreme, levels and so on, which did not work. Now, specifically, about the current situation, I'm very deeply worried. One, because we've come to a point where it is difficult to trust our policymakers and government. Because they tell us one thing, and then in the next moment, they are telling us the opposite. Look, our finance minister, he looked us in the face only a couple of months ago and told us that as for IMF, we would never go back to the IMF. And that it would undermine national sovereignty and national dignity. The same finance minister who is today leading the negotiations with the IMF. That's a problem, huge problem. Credibility has become a major problem. You just played a clip of our president, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, looking us in the eye and telling us that there will be no haircut. This is about 2 months ago, less than 2 months ago. What are we having today? So what they tell us is different from what they do. And that's a huge problem, huge problem. Credibility problems and so on, huge. But let's put that aside. This morning, as a matter of fact, most of the clips, I'd seen them before coming into the studio. But fortunately, you played them this morning, so the viewers have seen them. What is the real problem with these individual bondholders? There is a retired assistant superintendent of police who tells his story. He went on retirement. He served this country for over 20 years. Time is due, he's gone on retirement. His gratuity has been paid to him. He has many options. One of the options is to keep it under his bed and take all the risk associated with keeping that amount of money under your bed. He took a wise decision of buying government bonds so that his gratuity would not just serve him, but would also serve the country. His gratuity can be used, in order to promote production and distribution and so on. So he bought government bonds. He's past retirement, which means that he's not a young man. Now, the money he invested in the bond is being confiscated over a period of time. He cannot earn interest and so on. How is he supposed to survive? How is he just going to survive? By his calculation, by the time the government arrangement will mature, that he can get the interest of the bonds he bought, plus his principal, he'll be 80-something years old. 80-something years old. That is how old he will be before these processes mature. There's the case of the Ghanaian who worked in Switzerland. Is it Switzerland or Sweden? That video.
Yeah, we showed it.
Yes. This gentleman also worked outside Ghana, made his money there, collected his pensions and all his entitlements, came back into this country and invested them in government bonds because he was told that that's the most reliable investment you can make. With these measures, he has been living on the interest of the bonds. With these measures, he can no longer buy petrol, he cannot pay his rent, he cannot look after his grandchildren, and so on. By the time the government measures mature, he would already be past his 80s. Now, this man cannot go back to Sweden to go and work. The possibility of going back to Sweden is out of the question.
His age.
His age.
That's him.
Yeah. He can't go back to Sweden to work. You understand? Now, there's no opportunity for him to work in Ghana to make a living. So this is a sentence of death. Sentence of death on this poor man. He can't eat. He can't pay electricity. He can't do anything. You've sentenced him to death and so on, completely. So I think that it's important to take into account all of these individual cases which aggregate to give us a certain broad picture of what these measures will do to the economy and to all of us. Now, this morning, I'm reading on the front pages of one of the newspapers, the president appealing to investors outside and telling them that Ghana is the best destination for investment in West Africa. With this situation,
I mean, the irony of it.
What?
You have applied to the G20.
Yeah.
You have announced a debt restructuring with external people and domestic. There are negotiations. People have taken consultants. You have taken. And you are negotiating. And these are even your terms. That will look, I won't be able to even pay you until whatever. I'm going to restructure your things and you probably will get back your money in the 30s and all that. In the same breath, you're saying that this is the best place to invest in West Africa at the moment.
At the moment. When I read the story, I was lost.
In fact, for Ghanaians, the people living in this country, how many people will have the confidence to buy any government instrument today?
Randy, just a quick one. I think that that's fine. That's right.
No problem. I mean, if it's a short one.
No, the short one. I think that the investment is in two folds. You understand? So you have the issue of the money market, which we are accustomed to, and also seeking direct investment in your economy,
like
in
what?
certain sectors, your agribusiness space, your
all of those.
Which economy?
Yeah, but I
in which economy?
No, but in this economy. But because you need to come out of the current challenges that you're facing, you need to be able to stimulate. So, for example, if you're talking about space in our agribusiness sector, for example, and you're saying that okay, you want to engender that you're producing enough to consume and export. You can ask
if that is our thinking.
No, but that's what I'm saying.
Coming up with a DDE, did you think about the repercussions on the financial services sector when you announced a DDE the way it was structured? What you announced?
Yeah, but those are the technical.
No, I'm just saying that sometimes.
I understand.
I mean,
okay, sure. Go ahead, and then I'll come back. Yeah.
Now, I've seen some analysis which has been done by financial experts and banking experts and so on. And it's pretty worrying. Look, the projection is that out of 23 banks operating in Ghana, 17 of them will go under if we continue on this reckless path. 17 out of 23 banks are going to go under. What would that mean for the economy? What would that mean for ordinary workers who have put their monies in the banks? What would that mean for the foreign investor we are courting? The foreign investor is going to put his money in a bank. He's going to work with a bank. If 17 out of 23 banks will collapse, how can Ghana become, the best destination in West Africa for investment? Clearly not. Okay? So I think, look.
My point really, Kwesi, is that if there is a government that embarked on what it believed was a restructuring of the financial services sector and has told us that it spent 25 billion cedis in achieving that, it's going to take, and it believed that sanitization, in quote, of that space was so crucial to our economic development as a country. When that same government is going to take a decision like this, is the health of the financial services sector not something that must be a basic consideration? With all the men and women and expertise available, couldn't it have done all the financial modeling and remodeling and engineering and re-engineering to know the impact of this on the financial services sector?
Okay. But that is the crisis. That's the bigger crisis we are likely to face. Now, for me, the other problem, which is just, it springs out of what Randy has just said, is just the flip-flopping. Flip-flopping. Today we announce one measure, tomorrow morning we realize that it is a wrong measure, then we announce another measure, then we are going round in circles and so on. It doesn't give confidence to anybody. The flip-flopping doesn't give confidence to anybody. Government must be clear. Before government comes out to announce measures, there are ways of testing these models. Like you test everything in the laboratory, you can test financial models before you come out and announce them. You don't just wake up in the morning and announce measures and turn around to tell us that divine intervention will solve the problem. Divine what kind of invention?
Yes, Eric.